Okay, so there is no test for chapter 6. 6 and 7 go together. So there's a test for chapter 6 and 7. So there's no test next week, but we're going to finish up chapter 6 today. Oh, no, sorry. I'm taking that totally and utterly back. Chapter 2, I'm thinking of my pre-calculus class, which is doing chapter 6. There is no test on chapter 2. It's combined with chapter 3. So there is no test next week, but we are finishing up chapter 2 today. We will start chapter 3 next week. Okay. So yeah, sorry. Too many classes stuck in my head at the same time. Yeah, we're jump right to chapter 6. All right, so tonight we're going to look at finish up what we were talking about on Tuesday. We're going to look at the graphing with the x and y intercepts. So if it's not in slope-intercept form, I'm going to show you how to turn it to slope-intercept form if you'd like, or I'm going to show you how to actually graph it with the x and y intercepts as well. So you're going to see two different ways to graph it. And then we're going to look at the slope and some other stuff that's on the end of chapter 2. So after today, we'll have covered all the topics in chapter 2. All right, so the beginning stuff is pretty simple. This is just literally reminding you of what the x and y intercepts are. When you hear the word intercept, what do you think of? Well, what does the word intercept mean? To cross, right? Think about it like football. It's to intercept the ball. Yep. So the x and y intercepts are where it crosses the x-axis and the y-axis. So in this problem right here, if we look at it, my x-intercept is 3. So on this topic, they just want you to write it as 3. The official term, it would be 3, 0 as a point for the x-intercept, but they just want you to write it as 3. And my y-intercept is -4. A linear equation will always have an x and a y-intercept. Okay, so it will always cross the x-axis once, it'll always cross the y-axis once. The reason that there's a button there that says none is because not all graphs actually have an x-intercept. All functions will have a y-intercept, but not all functions will have an x-intercept. So, oh, I actually take that back. There is a couple functions that don't have a y-intercept either, but those are rare. So you will have an x and a y-intercept for all of these. All right. I'm not going to do another one of those because we're going to cover it again in a little bit anyway. All right. So to find the x and the y-intercept, so my x-intercept is written as the x value and then 0 for the y. And my y-intercept is 0 for the x and then y. So to find my x and the y-intercept, I'm basically just going to plug 0 in for the other one. So for my x-intercept, I'm going to do 6x 4y equals -36. I'm going to just eliminate the y. So I have 6x equals -36. So x equals -6. So to find my x-intercept, I just get rid of the y. For the y-intercept, I'm going to do the exact same thing, except this time I'm going to get rid of the x. So my y-intercept will be just 4y equals -36. So divide by 4, so you get y equals -9. 6 and -9. That always works. They're not always going to come out to necessarily be a whole number, but it'll always work. So even if you don't get a whole number, that's not a horrible thing. Sometimes you will get fractions for these. So here's another one, same thing, and I'm almost going to guarantee this is the topic that comes out with the fractions. But so I got -5x plus 8y equals 14. So they want the y-intercept first, so let's do the y one first. So I'm going to get rid of the x. So I have 8y equals 14. Divide by 8. So y equals 14 over 8. And then to do my x-intercept, I do the same thing. I just get rid of the y. So I have 5x equals 14. Divide by -5. So x equals -14 over 5. No, you actually, so Yes, you can. No, you don't have to. It just says write your answers as exact values. It means it doesn't want it as a decimal, it just wants it as a fraction. So you can leave it as 14/8. And in my opinion, for this stuff, I would leave it as 14/8 because less chances of you making a mistake simplifying it than getting the problem wrong. And the nice thing is when we're doing it, even when we're going to go off and graph it, you don't have to simplify it to graph it either. I'm going to show you how to plug the points in so you don't have to worry about simplifying it at all. You can. There's no problem with simplifying it. It's one extra step that you're going to make that if you mess up, even if you had the right answer before that point, it's going to mark it wrong. So Alex gives you enough things wrong to begin with. Make it a little simpler for yourself. All right, so and this one, so we look back at number 7, remember they gave us the x and the y-intercept and the line was going through it. When we're doing this one, all we're going to do is graph it. So it says my y-intercept is 8. So I'm going to put a point at 8. My x-intercept is at -7. So I'm going to put a point at -7 and connect my dots. Now, there was somebody that was having a little trouble with the graphing and putting it a little off, and they were having the right graph, and it was marking them wrong. Be very careful when you're clicking these points. Make sure it snaps to the point that you put there, because it could, if you're a little off on it, it will mark it wrong. So especially if they're fractions, you might not have it exactly on the line, it'll jump. So make sure it's actually on the point that you graphed and not just next to the point you graphed, because then it will mark it wrong. So. Does that make sense? Any questions with that? Okay. All right, so this one's basically doing this 2 things, putting them together. They're giving me my equation. They want us to find my x and my y intercept and then graph it. So we have 4x plus 6y equals -24. So we're going to get rid of my 6y. So I have 4x equals -24. 4. So x equals -6. And then I have 6y equals -24 divided by 6. So y equals -4. So my -6, -4. If they're whole numbers, I would just use the pencil to graph them. If they're not whole numbers, I would use the little plot tool, which we will do in a little bit. I'm going to show you that one too. So -6 and -4. Yes. So connect my 2 dots and graph it. All right, so now this is the one I'm going to show you 2 different ways to graph this one. So let's graph it with the y-intercept, or the x and y-intercepts first. So if I'm going to do the x and y-intercepts, I have 4x equals 8. So divide by 4. So x equals 2. And then I have y equals 8, because then I don't have to do anything for that one. So we can graph my 2 points. X equals 2, y equals 8. Connect my points and graph it. The other option that we have is I can take this and I can solve for y. So if I solve for y, I'm going to subtract the 4x from both sides. So I have y equals -4x plus 8. So now it's in slope-intercept form. So we can do it the same way that we did the graphs the other day. My slope is -4/1, and my y-intercept is 8. Notice how my graph still is at 8 there. And if I went down 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and over 1, I'm still on that line. Okay, so you can do it either way. Both of them will give you the exact same line. It just depends on which one's easier for you to do when you look at it originally. This one, both of them are actually pretty easy because you didn't have to have a number in front of the y. I like doing it with the x and y intercepts if it's in that format. Sometimes your fractions can get a little crazy, or sometimes the numbers are just too big to put on the graph. Like this one was y equals 8, and it went up to 10, so I had enough room. But if it wouldn't fit there, we'd have to move it down a little bit. Same thing on the x can happen sometimes too. So that can be a little bit of a difference things there. Let's see. Well, yeah, I was wondering. I'm thinking it's probably because of some of the traffic. Well, depending on which direction they're coming from. That's okay. All right, so let's look at a couple of word problems. All right, so this topic, when you're doing it, they want you to come up with the equation, and then they want you to solve it and come up with an answer. So Christine is a software saleswoman. Her base salary is $1,600, and she makes an additional $50 for every copy of History is Fun she sells. So when we're looking at this equation, we're always going to basically set it up under the y equals mx plus b format. Okay. So in this problem, we're looking for my starting value, which you're going to make no matter what, and we're looking for my slope, the thing that changes with that things. So in this case, my starting value is her base salary. So that B is going to be 1,600. The thing that changes is where it says $50 for every, or additional $50. That's $50 for every time. So that's a multiplication. So it's going to be 50 there. And you do want to make sure your lettering matches the letters that they're asking you. So in this case, they're telling you N represents the number of copies. So instead of an X, I'm going to put an N. And P is her pay. So I'm going to use a P there. So do make sure to use the lettering that they tell you and not just Y and X, because it will mark them wrong. Okay? Questions with how I came up with that equation? Or when I do it, it looks really, really simple. It's honestly with this one's one of those ones, it's a word problem that looks complicated, but in reality, it's because it's a word problem. You're looking for very specific pieces of information. You're looking for your starting piece. You're looking for what changes, those two things. All right. So once you find those two things, it's just plug into the formula. So now in this case, they're asking what happens if she sells 27 copies. So we're going to plug in 27. So P equals 50 times 27 plus 1,600. So 50 times 27 is 1,350. Yep. Plus 1,600 would be 20. So it's 1,350 plus 1,600 equals 2,950 is what she makes. So now let's go back and put that in. So my equation is P equals, I'm not sure if they're picky on the capitalization, but I would make it exactly what they have. So since they have capitals, and then 2,950. Sometimes the Alex is, sometimes it's not. I've learned just to not anger the Alex gods and just go with what they say. So, all right, let's try one more of those, and then we'll do the next one. All right, so if we're looking at this one, notice it's the same thing, same setup, right? So y equals mx plus b. So we put that in there. We're just going to change our numbers. So it says I'm starting off, it'll cost $4,500 to rent the trucks with an additional cost of $125 for each ton of sugar. So is the 4,500 going to be B or the 125 going to be B? Which one's my starting point, the 4,500 or the 125? 4,500. So that B becomes 4,500. And that means my M is 125. Now we just got to use our letters. So this is going to be so that's going to be S, and that'll be C. And there's my equation. Now I'm going to use a calculator to do this because I don't feel like doing it in my head. 125 times 19 is 2375 plus 4,500 is 68. And they do give you a calculator actually on this one. Oh, maybe they don't. They don't give you a calculator on this one.
No, they do.
No, that's a book. They don't give you a calculator on this one. But you can use your calculator.
Probably because they want you to do it.
Yeah.
Out, like do your work book.
So. All right, it's last word problem. The only difference on this one is they want you to graph it. So come up with the equation and then graph it. So let's look at this one. All right, so same setup. So y equals mx plus b. So in this case, they're adding water at a rate of 35 liters per minute, and there's 500 liters in the pond to start. So which one is my M, the 35 or the 500? Or which one's my B, the 35 or the 500? The 35 is the what? B. The 35 is the B or the 500 is the B? Nope.
Oh, 500.
300, okay, or 500. Got it. That's what I was trying to figure out if he was saying that, which, that's okay. So the 500 is the B, and then it's 35 would be the M. And then this should be M for minutes and liters, maybe?
Yeah,
So let's see what they had as the actual letters. Let's see if we guessed right. Oh, it's T for time instead of M for minutes. That's fine. Oh, and it's W for water instead of L for liters. So W equals 35T plus 500. Now, to graph this, personally, I would actually use the point tool for this one instead of using the numbers. Just because it's going to be hard to do 3 or 5. Well, 500 is easy, but it's going to be hard to do the rest of them. So if we use the plot tool for this, it's going to be a little bit easier. So my y-intercept is 0, 500. So just hit plot. Well, you do have to plot, but you could use the pencil for it. It's just so now I need one more point, right? So if we did my slope, how much am I going to go up by for every one? It was up by 35, right? And over by 1. So we're adding 35. So it's 1 and 535. So basically, if you plug in 1 to it, what are you going to get? Okay. So if you plug 1 into this equation, what would you get? 535. And now I have my 2 points that I can connect my dots on. And this is one where, look, like, see how it snaps to the one below it or above it? So just make sure you snap to your actual point. I'm going to try one more of those, actually. All right, it doesn't seem, because there was a topic and maybe they don't do it in this one. There's one that uses cookies. Yeah, so, and you know what? I haven't actually seen it. If it comes up, honestly, I would just skip it and do the other ones. So yes, you might have to do an extra problem, but don't do the cookie problem. Because it's asking how much sugar, instead of going up by 1, you're going over by 30 cookies and 1 cup of sugar. So the formula is set up a little differently, and everybody always gets it wrong because they do it the same way as every other problem in this topic. So it's literally just a cookie problem. So if it comes up, just skip it and you'll do an extra problem, which isn't the end of the world. So, all right. So we're done with that one. Let me pull up the other stuff. Oh, there's my Facebook page. All right, next set of work. All right, so this one, we're going to start this topic, basically the 9th topic, it's looking a lot more at slope. So when we're looking at this problem here, I've got for each line, determine if the slope is positive, negative, 0, or undefined. When we're reading a graph, you read your graph just like you read. You read from left to right, okay? So when we're looking at a graph, we're looking at it that direction. So if it's going up from left to right, it's positive. If it's going down from left to right, it's negative. If it doesn't change going left to right, it is no change, or it's 0, okay? If it is going straight up and down, it's undefined, it's vertical, okay? So if you think about it, it's really easy to walk on the floor because it's a 0 slope, okay? And it's really hard to walk up a wall because it's an infinite slope, all right? So that's the easiest way to think. Like straight up and down, undefined. Flat surface is 0. And then the positive and negative are pretty self-explanatory when you look from left to right. A lot of people try to look the other direction and get it mixed up. Always read. All right, so this one, line 1 is going to be what? Positive. Line 2 is going to be 0. Line 3 is going to be? Yep. And line 4 is going to be? Undefined. Very good. Yeah, let's do one more of those real quick. Line 1 is going to be 0. Good. Line 2, negative. Line 3, and line 4, undefined. And these both came up with there was one of every one. I have seen it where there's not one of every one. Okay, so do not assume that there's going to be one of every one. Look at each one individually. All right. When we're looking for slope, if they're going to give it to you on a graph, your life's easy because you can discount. Okay. So when we're counting, do this one over here because I want to actually draw on it. Yes. So remember, slope is rise over run. Remember that's why we graphed it that way. So from here, so when you're doing your rise and your run, you always want to start at your leftmost point. Okay, so start at the left and we're moving to the right. So in this case, I'm going to start right at this point and you always go up or down first. If you do that, you're always going to get your sign correct. So if I'm going to go up, my sign is positive. If I'm going down, my sign is negative. The other thing to look at is how your line is going. If my line is going up, my slope should be positive at the end. If my line is going down, my slope should be negative at the end. Okay, so in this case, I'm going up. So I went up by 1, 2, 3. And then I went over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by 5. So my slope is 3/5. That's rise over run. And that's it. As long as you start at the leftmost point, you're never going to mess up your signs because if I'm going up, it's positive. If I'm going down, it's negative. Okay, so always go up or down first and start at the leftmost point. Maybe it's not going to. Okay, I'll listen to the voicemail later. All right. Questions with that? All right, let's do one more. So this was 3/5. Okay, so now this one, I'm going down, correct? So actually, let's do this one. So in this case, I'm going to go down. So that's -3, and then over 2. Since I'm always going to the right, the bottom number is always positive. So this slope is -3 over 2. Questions with that? Are we good? All right, if they're giving you as points, now you got one of two choices. You can make a graph, or you can do it the slope equation. We're going to do it the slope equation. I'm going to show you that equation. So my slope equation is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So in this case, I've got my 2 points. I've got 2, 5, and 8, -4. My suggestion to you is to write the points down and label your points before you plug them in. Way too often, people will do this out without labeling their points, and they will just put them in the wrong spots and not even realize it and get the answer wrong. So your points are always x, y. This is my first point, and that's my second point. So I now have my points labeled, and now that I can plug them in. A lot of times people will just go 2 minus 5, 8 minus -4, or they'll put the x's on top and the y's on the bottom. It's like a lot of little mistakes that you can make. So by writing the formula down on top of your paper and then labeling your points, you won't make a lot of those little mistakes that happen. So in this case, I've got -4 minus 5 over 8 minus 2. So I've got -9 over 6. And you can leave it just like that. Okay. All right, I'm going to do one more of these, and I'm not even going to go through them. I'm just going to make one up because there's this very specific thing I want to do. I'm going to rewrite the slope formula. And I don't know if it's going to give me it, and I don't feel like going through a bunch of problems not to get it. So let's see, we're going to do -2, -4, and 7, -6. So these are my 2 points. So again, label them x1, y1, x2, y2. So when we plug them in, so we got m equals y2 is -6 minus y1 is -4. 7 minus a -2. Notice, this is a very common mistake, is right here. The formula's got a negative sign in it. That negative sign is not that negative sign. Okay, so you've got 2 negative signs. You have to make sure you put them there. All right. A lot of times people put the negative sign and forget the other one completely and get the answer wrong. So do make sure when you're plugging them in that you put the negative sign and then put the number, whatever the number happens to be.
On top of that,
Well, yes, and that's the piece. So now when we're doing this, my 2 negative signs become a positive. So this problem is now -6 plus 4, which is -2. And 7 plus 2, which is 9. So that does make a difference, and it's very common to make that error. So. All right, the next one. Same concept, but this one, this topic is 0 and undefined slopes. there's actually a couple, like you can figure out a pattern to this one if you want. And I'm gonna actually, that's not a 0. I'm gonna show you the pattern. You could easily do this with the slope formula. If you get a 0 on top, it's obviously 0. If you get a 0 on the bottom, it's undefined. So I'm going to show you this, and then I'm going to show you the pattern to actually look for it. So in this case, I've got x1, y1, x2, y2. So I've got -3 minus a -3 over 4 minus a -7. -3 plus 3 is 0. 4 plus 7 is 11. So that answer is 0. Okay.
0 divided or times by anything is 0.
So, and the next one, I have 5, 3, and 5, -7. So x1, y1, x2, y2. So I've got -7 minus 3 over 5 minus 5. So I got -10 over 0, which is undefined. So now, so you can do it that way, it works. The key piece here is, if my y's are the same, it's 0. If my x's are the same, it's undefined. Because the x's are on the bottom, and when you subtract them, you get 0. The y's are on top, so you subtract them, you get the 0 there at the top. So if the x's are the same, it's always undefined. If the y's are the same, it's always 0. Okay. So you can do it out with the slope formula. That's fine. It'll work. If you can remember the pattern for it, it'll make your life a little bit easier. So this is 0, and this is on. Oh, I have to flip the button. Undefined. All right, so now they're going to go back and have you do it the way that I showed you already. So this is going to be really simple. So my y-intercept is -6. They put a point at -6. My slope is 6. So that means I'm going to go up 6 and over 1. And draw my line. So y-intercept graph first. And then my slope is I'm going up it and over it. Yep. What's my slope? 9. Remember, it's y equals mx plus b. So 9 is my slope. What's my y-intercept? -2. All right, so now this is the one that we're going to have to solve for y because they want the slope and the y-intercept. They don't want an x and x-intercepts in there. So we've got to solve this one, which is fine. All right, so we've got, oh, let me write in the marker instead of a highlighter. -12x plus 4y equals -4. Good. You're going to be quiet for a minute. All right. So we're going to take this 12x and we're going to add it over to the other side. So I'm going to do 12x on both sides. I cannot put the 4 and the 12x together. They're not the same. So I have 4y equals, I always put the x first. I always put the 12x first, just because I want to keep it in the y equals mx plus b, and x goes before the number. When you do that, just make sure you keep your signs with it. The 12 was positive, and then 4 was negative. So the 4 still is negative, and the 12 still is positive. Now we're going to divide everything by 4. So y equals, this one, you do have to simplify the fractions. It wants it in simplest form. So 12 divided by 4 is 3, and 4 divided by 4 is 1. So now my slope is 3, and my y-intercept is -1. Okay. All right, let's try one more of those. Yeah, good. I was hoping they'd give me one that's not a whole number. All right, so take a minute and try this one real quick. Let me write it down. All right, so you should have subtracted the 3x from both sides. It's got negative 4y equals negative 3x minus 20. Then you're dividing each one of them by negative 4. So we get y equals negative 3 divided by negative 4 is 3/4 positive, because the two negatives make a positive. Negative 20 divided by negative 4 is positive 5. So we have 3/4 is my slope, and 5 is my y-intercept. And 5. All right, this one, same thing. Then they want me to grad. Then they want me to graph it. So I've got negative 3x minus 4y equals 12. So I'm going to add the 3x to both sides. So negative 4y equals 3x plus 12. And divide by negative 4. So y equals negative 3/4 minus 3. Always put the negative sign on top. Even though the negative sign was on the bottom, it doesn't matter. Always put it on top. This way, you're always going to go up or down first when you do your slope, so it makes it easier. And it's also proper to put the slope on top. Or the negative sign on top. So I've got negative 3/4. Yeah, notice when you type it, it puts it in front of it too, which is fine. And negative 3. So now we're going to graph it. So I go down to negative 3 for my y-intercept. And from here, I'm going to go down 3 and over 4. And then connect my dots. And we're good. Just a case problem. Let's go one more. All right, this one is a word problem that wants y-intercept and slope. So, you know, in the other word problem, we had they gave us the information, we had to come up with the equation. This is backwards. They're giving you the equation, they want to know the information from it. So, remember, your slope is the thing that changes, right? So in this problem, what's my slope? 25 or 1200? The 25, because it's the one in front of x. So now the question is what is the change in total cost for each block, or what is the cost to get started? So is the change it or the cost to get started the 25? Remember, slope is your change, right? So slope is my 25, and that is my change in total cost. The y-intercept, or your b, is the thing that starts. That's my starting value. So what's the cost to get started? $1,200. All right, this one. What is the change per week? So in this equation, y equals 550 plus 30x. What's the change? 30. And what's the starting amount of money? 550. I'm hoping you can get one that has a negative sign in it. Nope, it's not going to give me one that has a negative sign in it. Just notice their note. If their slope or the thing is negative or minus, put the negative sign in. That's fine. It can happen. Okay, so just put the negative sign in. So. And with that,